Hey Trekkies, and welcome to Trek Freaks, part of the Geek Freaks Network. On this podcast, we review and analyze episodes of Star Trek starting all the way back at the original series. My name is John, and I am joined by our very special guest co-host, Mr. John Kirk.
Hi there.
How are you doing, John?
Oh, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do? We've talked before we started recording here, but can you give us a little background of your experience in Star Trek?
Sure, yeah. I'm a freelance geek culture journalist. I specialize in pop culture, and I write for a variety of different websites and a couple of magazines. And I'm also a celebrity and comics panel host for Fan Expo Canada, Toronto Comic Con, Fan Expo Boston, and I've also been at Fan Expo in Orlando called MegaCon.
Mm-hmm. That's got to be a lot of fun. How do you, I probably should have asked this before we got into the recording. How do you get into being a host for all these conventions? That seems like it'd be like a dream job for most geeks.
Well, you got to do your time in the trenches. You have to be able to, first of all, show that you know your stuff. It's like, it's not just about, being somebody who loves a particular type of fandom and grows up and becomes like a total fanboy in it. You got to put something into what you love to get something out of it. So you've got to write, you've got to create, you've got to perform, you've got to be a part of your fandom more than just an observer. You've got to be a participant. So if you've ever had aspirations of being a journalist or a creative writer, then start getting involved in venues where you can let those talents come out. Even volunteering at comic conventions, being somebody who is reliable, who can herd the talent, who could be the gopher, who can help set up displays and stuff. Even being a part of your fandom in whichever way you can. It gets you into places, it gets you into things. And also when you write, you publish, you're accredited. You can actually look back and point to something and say, look, I know about this stuff because somebody actually published my opinion on it. And it mattered to a bunch of people.
Yeah,
So,
I'm legitimate. I have some actual produced products.
Right. So you've got to be involved. And I think that's in whichever way you can. And that's at least that's been my experience. I mean, I really, really just wanted to write about the stuff that I love, and I wanted to share it with people. And so I started looking for ways to do that. And it's been a lot of fun for the last 14 years.
Nice. I like that. I like that message to our audience, but I think it's more for myself. Like, I would love to someday be doing that kind of, make a career out of geekdom. So I just got to start getting into creating some content aside from the podcast.
Well, and when you branch out, when you meet people too, you find people with similar interests and you can collaborate. Mm-hmm. There's also a lot of joy in collaborating with people who have similar, like-minded tendencies, right? So
yeah. All right, so today we're going to be reviewing the original series, Season 2, Episode 10, Journey to Babel. But before we get into that review, I want to ask you a Star Trek question. You ready?
Okay, sure.
All right. This is relative to our Episode 2, it's great when we have a question that actually applies. If Spock had a human emotion that would sneak out from time to time, what would it be and what would bring it out?
There's a lot. This is actually a really more common question in Trek culture than you might think. And you're right, it does totally apply in this episode's case. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, I think it's insecurity.
Yeah.
And, if you think about the Vulcan way of life, the Vulcans are not just supposed to be physically superior. They live in a harsh environment, the desert sun, but they also put a tremendous amount of academic discipline, physical discipline on, growing up, and on their kids. They put a lot of expectations because they're Vulcan and they're supposed to be able to do it, right? They are superior in every way. What sort of pressure does that put on a normal Vulcan, never mind a half human, half
Yeah.
Vulcan hybrid? Because
Mhm.
he's always got at the back of his mind, is he good enough? And actually we see that in this episode with the dynamics between Sarek, Amanda, and Spock in a big way, because he is trying to get his father's approval.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to, will Spock take command, or will he donate blood for his father's operation?
Hmm.
He's not making a decision on the basis of what he wants to do. He's making a decision on what he knows he has to live up to. So
Yeah.
I think it's insecurity, because if you think about it, he's constantly getting needling from Dr. McCoy on a regular basis.
Hmm.
McCoy likes to point out his Vulcan, you green-blooded, stubborn half breed, like he really puts a lot of pressure on Spock. And that it's out of a place of just being cantankerous, and he still loves him. But at the same time, Spock is constantly reminded of what he is not and
Hmm.
what he wants to be. So I
Yeah.
think that if there was a human emotion, it would be that constant sense of insecurity.
Hmm. I think that you explain it so much better than that I was thinking maybe excitement, because it's not a negative emotion. It's not something that he would have to fight so much to suppress. Being joyous or excited about something, though he doesn't show joy very often except for
Yeah.
when he's drugged. But in my mind, I was thinking he loves a challenge and he's so fascinated by science. So a new scientific discovery, if they discovered a new particle or something like that, some kind of exciting scientific discovery might elicit excitement in him. But yeah, we don't see that much. And I like how you explain that that's kind of pre-programmed in him. The way he was made is that he's going to be insecure his whole life, because he's just never going to quite reach that Vulcan perfection that they expect from him.
But isn't it interesting about like emotions, and like if you think about the human condition,
Hmm.
it's very easy for us to suppress what we love and what we like to do
Hmm.
in light of what we have to do.
Yeah.
And to suppress joy and to suppress things that we like, we sometimes we look at those things as luxuries that we can sort of put aside and
Hmm.
do the things that we have to do or we don't want to do. So negative emotions, just naturally just come up because we are ready to face them. We have to face them. It's just, for me, for my culture, it's that stiff, upper lip. It's that
Hmm.
British stiff upper lip mentality. It's like, oh, well, you've got to do this. We have to put the fun time can wait. But
Hmm.
we never really embrace the stuff that we love and the stuff that makes us happy.
Yeah.
So that those negative emotions just they just come unfettered rising up, and and I think the Vulcans, and let's face it, the Vulcans are a human creation, so
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. All right. Now we're going to jump into our warp speed recap. In preparation for an important meeting, the Enterprise has been tasked with gathering Federation delegates and transporting them safely to the Council on Babel. Sorry. Harder than it sounds. The passengers begin to argue. The captain breaks it up, but later one is found dead. There is an imposter among us. Spock's father is dying. The captain is stabbed, and the Enterprise is attacked by a small but very fast ship. With Spock's help, Bones is able to save his father. Kirk, still wounded, makes his way to the bridge to outwit their attackers. The small ship is self-destruct, and their imposter ingests poison. The crew deduces that the attackers must be Orions. Safe for now, the Enterprise continues on to Babel. So, sorry, that had a lot of mistakes in it. I have dry mouth, and that's just not going away.
all right.
Let me keep drinking water then. Yeah, this is a really, really good episode with a lot going on in it. Sometimes
Yeah.
we have just kind of a simple episode with a single plot, and this had kind of a lot. So let's go through our mission report scene by scene. So we open up with the Enterprise. The captain and crew are kind of preparing for the Vulcan ambassador to arrive. We hear that they have 114 ambassadors that are going to be coming aboard to the Enterprise, and they are going to have like a formal reception. And we could presume that this is for some kind of peace negotiations at this point. There's a docking scene which I like. They did this is obviously remastered, and the remastered scenes. I'm so happy so far with how they do these because it's not like the new shows, which I love the new shows, but they're portraying this really old technology as if it's super future tech that we haven't thought about yet. But I like how remastering these episodes, they make it all fit. They stay within the era. It just looks really clean for 60s technology, 60s idea of future technology.
Yes.
So we see the shuttle landing in the dock, and then we meet the Vulcans, right? The Vulcan ambassador. So this scene specifically was impressive to me from a director standpoint. They did that open doorway shot. Did you recognize that?
Yep.
They have oh, go ahead.
It's the staging, right?
Yeah.
It's like that's the presentation. You've got the it's sort of like an entry point into another room or another world, and then this world comes in, and of course we've got the security guards and the honor guard, and we've got McCoy fussing and getting annoyed about being in a dress uniform. Spock shows up, and it's a wonderfly staged. But I mean, that's Joseph Pevney, right? Joseph Pevney directed this one.
Yeah.
And he was an actor, and he also was a Hugo award winner for best dramatic presentation, and that was for City on the Edge of Forever.
Yeah. That's such a good episode too.
Yeah, and he knew how to. He was an incredible photographer. Like, he had a wonderful eye, and he knew how to stage people. And he was like a veteran of like 30 films or something like that. So he knew his craft.
Yeah. And we see that Spock and Bones are kind of chatting up front, but meanwhile we see in the background, because there is good staging, Sarek and his wife are getting off the ship, and they kind of talk a little bit, and they're walking forward. So it's all within one shot, which is just, it was done really well. And so
I think that's the secret. I think that's the key to this episode. I'm trying to think of who said this, but this is like the best Star Trek sandwich you can get out of the original episodes. This is the one that has so many layers in it. It has so many themes. Like, you've got the espionage, the diplomacy, encounter with different races. You have starship combat going on. You have the introduction of a new race that we don't know, and I think this is the first time that Orions are actually mentioned. So this episode is just so densely packed with material that it's like a big hero sandwich, right? It's just got layer upon layer upon layer of stuff, and it's just fantastic. This is one of my top 5. This episode.
Yeah, it's definitely up there for me too. So at this point, we are introduced to Sarek and his wife, who we later get her name as Amanda. And I kind of like the back and forth where Kirk says, hey, Spock's going to give you a tour. And Sarek's like, actually, we'd rather have somebody else. And that seems kind of rude, but it's like, all right, well, Spock, you can go down and go visit your family while we're here. You got a couple hours. And he clarifies, like, no, Sarek and his wife, they are my parents.
Yeah, that's an awkward moment right there. And actually, if you read the James Blish adaptation of this episode, it's like they focus on that moment. So it's like there's a very awkward silence, and it's actually described. It's mentioned in the adaptation, the novella adaptation of this. There was an awkward silence, and it's like everybody's like, "What's going on?" Right? And it's so pregnant. It's so prominent.
Yeah.
Sarek and his wife are my parents, Captain. It's like, oh, sorry, man.
Yeah.
I just stepped in it, didn't I? But it's also interesting how that sort of shows how little of his first officer and friend that he actually knows to this point.
Yeah.
So it's also kind of telling, again, there's so much in here that you can unpack, right? But that relationship between Kirk and Spock, this is one of those moments where, like, I did not know that about you. And what a terrible opportunity to find out. Like, this is not the right time. I get it, but
Yeah.
what can I do? And then when you see him try to, connect with Amanda, when you see Kirk try to connect with Amanda, you can tell he's like, I got to fix this.
Yeah.
So
It's like
that's a very important scene. Those few moments are so pivotal to exploring that relationship, not just between Sarek and Spock, but between Kirk and Spock as well. So
yeah.
So much you can get out of that.
And we see a lot of episodes where we think like these guys are best friends, they know everything about each other. But then this is a perfect example where Spock is actually very private and he doesn't share more than he has to. So Kirk may know everything that he can or that he has seen from Spock, but there's still a lot he doesn't share. So, and at this point, I realized right away that the actor playing Sarek was super familiar, and I looked back and realized he had just been in The Balance of Terror.
That's Mark Leonard.
Yeah, Mark Leonard played that first Romulan. So it's cool. He's playing, two pretty key characters in these episodes.
Yeah, and then he shows up, of course, in Star Trek 3 and Star Trek 4, and of course we see him in Star Trek: The Next Generation. And this is the thing. This is a cool thing about Mark Leonard. Mark Leonard should actually gets credit for creating the Klingon language.
Really?
Yeah. Now everybody, I just go to my. Yeah, so Mark Okrand, who wrote the Klingon dictionary, right?
Yeah.
Basically credits Mark Leonard with having put together early stages of the syntax that he used to basically create the Klingon language. So that's another cool thing about Mark Leonard as well.
That's crazy. I like that. All right, so after this, we have our intro and then a captain's log. In the captain's log, they explain that the Enterprise is bringing the ambassadors to a neutral planetoid codenamed Babel. Kirk says that the issues of the council are politically complex and the passengers are explosive. Now, does it seem like it doesn't seem like a recipe for disaster? You're putting all these people on one ship when there's this kind of extreme political decision that needs to be made, and obviously everybody's hot about it. He's saying the passengers are explosive. To me, this sounds like putting a bunch of U.S. politicians on one cruise ship and expecting it's going to make it to its destination safely. Right.
Well, and of course, again, like I said this to you earlier, but Star Trek was a product of its times, right?
Yeah.
So basically, the Federation of Planets, like, even though these are different alien races, they're all members of the Federation, right? So they're supposed to be all on the same side.
Yeah.
So even though they're arguing with each other and they have contempt and disregard for like the Tellarites and the Vulcans and the Andorians and the Vulcans. It's basically like putting all, and McCoy says this at the beginning of the episode too. It's like you're putting a bunch of people on a ship who hate each other.
Yeah.
What could go wrong? Like, come on, it's a recipe for disaster. But we find, of course, that it's not really, the delegates that we have to worry about. So, but there is that atmosphere that's been established of instability and distrust, and everybody's watching each other out the corner of their eyes.
Yeah.
So.
And you would think that this ship would quickly become a major target too, like we see later it is, because it has 114 important decision-making people within the Federation. So
and it tells you something. It tells you something about the Federation, intelligence security. I mean, we're gonna nobody look at that ship. It's got all these people on it, and we're gonna look over this way. Oh, look at that star over there. But no, the secret gets out, right? Yeah.
Yeah. They have too much confidence in the Enterprise because it's done, worked all these miracles before. It's their flagship, so they think, oh, it's not going to be any problems. They can take on a fight, but. And maybe toe to toe, if another ship came up, a regular ship, then sure, but a planted spy, now that changes things a lot. So at this point, we see Kirk is giving a tour to Sarek and Amanda. Amanda talks to Spock briefly. She questions like why he doesn't smile. Like, you've lived amongst humans for so long, you should have learned how to smile. And I like his line. He says, "Humans smile with so little provocation." And it's kind of funny. I try to right away. I think about that. Like, well, yeah. Anytime I make eye contact with somebody, I smile at them just to try to, be non-hostile. But it got to be really funny coming seeing it from a Vulcan perspective. Like, why are you smiling at me? There's nothing to be cheerful about. But then we hear that Spock and his father haven't been getting along for a while. His father didn't like the fact that he joined Starfleet instead of going to the Vulcan Science Academy. He supports Starfleet, but would rather his son, study Vulcan science. And then Amanda does explain to Kirk when they're talking alone that it's been 18 years since the two of them have spoken, Kirk and Spock. So that's a that's a while. And I've always kind of, I don't know, I haven't seen all of Star Trek. I'm working on it, but I've seen a lot of different series. But I've always kind of wondered too what the timeline works out like with Spock. Was he, because Vulcans can live to be hundreds of years old? So it's like, is he 50? Is he 100? Has he already lived a lifetime before on another ship or something like that? But this shows he, graduated and then went straight to Starfleet, been there for 18 years. So he's not, 200 years old or anything like that, like his dad.
Well, this is the other thing about this episode too that I love, because the canon that's contained within this episode is so rich.
Yeah.
Like you can take an aspect like that and you could say, okay, well, now we can surmise that Spock's Starfleet career is at least 18 years long because of that, right? Because we know that he stopped talking to Spock when he declined his position in the Vulcan Science Academy. He must have gone straight to Starfleet. He must have at least served for 18 years in Starfleet, and now all of a sudden Sarek and Spock are face to face. So the canon junkies love this episode because not only does it talk about stuff like that, like Spock's background, his family background, but we also get insight into the Vulcan way of life. So we know that there's a Vulcan Science Academy. We learn about the Salots, right? The Vulcan teddy bears with the 6-inch fangs, which we see in Star Trek the animated series.
Oh, right. Okay. I was like, I haven't seen these anywhere before, but I haven't watched the animated series either.
Right. So people that love canon love this episode because of all those connections. And DC Fontana, because she crammed so much into this episode. That's what I mean about the sandwich. Like, you can take so much out of this, and it goes to like the canon people, timelines, insight to alien races. We see starship combat. We see Kirk Fu. Like everything is in here that we love about Star Trek.
Yeah,
and Fontana put all of that in there, and that is such a gift. Like to be able to do that.
And to not feel like things were shoehorned in, but it all fits together. It's just a puzzle she had to build
seamlessly. And what's more, it becomes like the bedrock for other writers to draw back upon and create, and build. And I think that's why this is one of my favorite episodes, is because it has all those repercussions and connections.
Yeah,
I think that's the strength of this episode right there. Because it has so much, you can take so much out, and it builds not just for that particular series, but it's contributed so much to Next Generation, the animated series, and to the whole lore of Star Trek.
Yeah, and that's what makes the newer shows so good too, is when they do have those callbacks and they tie together these threads between the lore, so it really makes it feel authentic and real. So at this point, we see that Amanda, Spock's mom, hopes to see some kind of humanity in Spock. And I know we talk about this and Spock's emotions all the time, but why do you think we don't see any bit of humanity? He is half human, so he must be fighting to suppress that side. But you would think, at least some aspect of his character would be more human than Vulcan, right?
Well, there's two things I can immediately say to that. First of all, it goes back to that whole idea of insecurity, right? Because he's constantly fighting against what he is supposed to be, as opposed to, what he is or what he wants to be. So he's always trying to live up to that Vulcan ideal. And in this episode, it's made even harder because he's struggling to get the approval of his dad.
Yeah.
Now, the second thing I'd say about this is that Amanda is not a human mom. Is not a Vulcan mom. She's a human mom.
Yeah.
And human mothers, and we all know this, as we grow up, our mothers sometimes lose a sense of perspective about where we are, because we're not children anymore, right?
Yeah.
We are adults, we are professionals, and sometimes there are nuances about our life as adults that our
Mhm.
mothers, our parents, are not privy to anymore.
Mhm.
So Amanda's looking at Spock as the child she knew, and not as the man and the Starfleet officer that he is.
Yeah. And I think we later
So,
see Sarek explaining that difference to her, that he deserves
right,
respect as a Starfleet officer, not just as my son, but, because he's a man of Starfleet, he needs to be respected.
right, because if I know, and I think we've all had conversations with our parents in our
Mhm.
adult lives where we try to explain something to them, and they give us an answer that we had when, that we were given when we were 13.
Yeah.
And it's like, Mom, that doesn't work anymore. Why? Well, because I'm 45 years old, I'm paying taxes. I
Right.
I have family obligations of my own. I can't just you know go in the corner and think about it for a little while. I mean, so I
Right.
think there's that sense of detachment that Amanda has, from Spock being the adult as opposed to the child that she knew. Like, you used to smile, you used to do this. Okay, well, I also like to eat Salisbury steak, and now I've gone off that, Mom. Like, come on.
Yeah. I've changed. I'm not your little baby boy anymore.
And it's true, and that is such a human thing. Is we lose sight of our, like, I do it with my own kids. I mean, my oldest daughter is 16 now.
Oh God, poor soul.
I know, and it's so weird because I would be able to have conversations with her where she would nod and she would accept and she would go, now the conversations are challenging. Well, I don't think you should do that. Oh, who the heck are you?
Yeah, she
And
has
what
an
happened to
opinion
the
all of a
kid that
sudden.
you and what happened to the kid that just used to go along with everything I said? So, parents lose a sense of perspective about their kids as they grow older and as the kids grow older. So I think that's the second thing that's going on in this as well,
Yeah. Hmm.
which again talks about how good of a writer DC Fontana is,
Yeah.
to be able to insert that part of the human condition
Hmm.
into that particular part of the scene. And it's so delicate, it's so intricate, it's just amazing.
Yeah. And like you're saying, like they packed so much into just a regular, 50, 58 minute or whatever episode. And it's just, it all fits. It's
Mhm.
not uncomfortably packed.
Right.
So at this point, we get a signal from the bridge. Ahura picked up a signal. She says it was strong, but it was brief. It was, sorry, brief. So she couldn't identify where it was coming from. Then we go back to Kirk. Gives us another captain's log, where he kind of explains a little more why they're doing what they're doing. He says this meeting is to determine if the Corridan planets will be admitted to the Federation or not. So now we know what their discussions are going to be about.
Mhm.
And so we cut to a scene where we see the different aliens having that like a reception or uh, yeah, different aliens mingling. I like the scene because it first introduces a bunch of aliens, but we see a bunch of aliens that it doesn't introduce. We'll never see again, probably. But it just kind of expands the world or expands the galaxy in Star Trek, to open up your mind a little more. But the ones, so specifically, we see obviously humans and Vulcans. We see Andorians for the first time, Tellarites, I believe, both for the first time, and
Mhm.
they focused on, the camera follows these copper skinned aliens. I was really hoping they were a character that comes back, and I had to look it up online, and I couldn't find anything else about them except they called them copper skinned aliens.
Yeah, they're like Oompa Loompas.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, man, that would be cool if there's a planet of these guys somewhere and learn more about them. But that was a really cool scene. And I was even stopping it to see the other alien races in the background and try to study if I could like figure out what one of them was, but they were all just very unique. So I love seeing that in Star Trek. Then we have the Tellarite ambassador, Gav,
Yeah.
stops Sarek and demands to know his vote. They want to know. He's pretty much says that your vote won't be the decision right now. I understand that, but your word has a lot of sway on other people, and so pretty much however he's going to go is how a lot of people are going to follow. And he wants to understand why he would vote that way. But Sarek says, no, we're going to save the discussion for Babel. And then Kirk breaks it up pretty early before it gets out of hand. So just after that little discussion argument is where we hear about the teddy bear, which I thought was hilarious. And like you're saying, it's great for the canon. So Bones asks Amanda about Spock's childhood. She says, well, not necessarily he would frolic and play like other kids, but he did have this celat, and it's kind of like a fat teddy bear. After she leans, though, Bones lights up. He just loves hearing that. You're waiting for his snarky comments or something. But then Spock clarifies that on our planet the teddy bears are alive and have 6-inch fangs. So I thought that was hilarious. So a question for you: you probably, you would definitely know this before me. Have you ever seen a celat like plush or any kind of merchandise that's made like those?
I've seen two. One was about, when was that? 2006, 2007. There was a small Star Trek conference up here in Toronto, called Polaris, and I think that they had somebody at home. It was a homemade one, basically, and it was meant to be on the cutesy scale as opposed to the way that we saw it in the animated episode, which the name of is escaping me right now and it's bugging me. I'll have to look that up, but they made it just really cute, and it had like these enormous like tusk-like fangs that came up as opposed to going down. Canines, as incisors, or what are the ones on the bottom? Anyway,
like a walrus kind of thing.
Yeah, and they came up as like a inverse saber-toothed tiger type thing. And then I've seen one at San Diego, and it was an import. It was a Japanese one, I think. And it looked more like a leopard, like a tiger, like a very lean female tiger without the mane.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of a brand, no.
I don't know how well it would sell, but to me, I would want to buy one at least. Just now, having seen this episode, heard that, it's like, okay, cool. I could put that on my shelf, and that's Spock's teddy bear when he was a kid. That'd be hilarious. So then we get a call from the bridge as an unidentified vessel. Chekhov reports it's a small vessel, and there's no other ships that are authorized to be in that space, so it's alarming to them. Kirk wants to move in a little closer, get a closer look. We see Amanda and Sarek talking. Pretty much, he's like you're saying, he points out that Amanda kind of embarrassed Spock, and that he deserves to be respected, or shown respect. And she's telling him that he's showing human-like pride, which would be an insult to a Vulcan. And I just like that kind of back and forth. But he's like, well, no, this isn't pride. This is logical. He, pretty much worked hard to be a man of Starfleet. He deserves the respect that comes along with it. And then she still doesn't quite understand. She admits that. And then I see they do that little 2-finger kiss. They did it earlier before too, which I assume is just a Vulcan, sign of affection. But I like that back and forth that kind of shows that his dad still respects him and believes he deserves respect, even though they disagree on his career choice.
Yeah, and that's that's the Vulcan condition right there, right? Is excellence at all times. And that's why I think that pressure, that insecurity is so strong in Spock, because if Sarek can put aside his resentment and annoyance and irritation at Spock and this feud that they've had for the last 18 years, to still say, yeah, you really need to give your kid a little bit more respect than that.
Yeah.
And I think that's telling about their relationship, that it's not as bad as everybody thinks. It's just basically a little minor thing that's just turned into like an 18-year gap. Yeah. And to go towards that, actually, that is not uncommon in the Scottish culture.
Yeah.
Because I don't know this with any other cultures, but I mean, in Scottish culture, it is very common for family members to not speak to each other for a very long period of time. And being Scottish myself, I I have seen this firsthand,
Mhm.
like with my mother and with her relatives. And it's like, oh, yeah, well, we don't talk to them. Well, why don't you talk to them? Well, because he annoyed me back in 1975. Well, what did he do? Well, he insulted Elvis. Oh, well, okay, then. And then that was enough to not talk to somebody for like 7 years, right?
Yeah. Oh man, that's good.
So, I mean, I can actually understand that sort of Vulcan stubbornness, because it
Mhm.
comes from a place of like, from um, personal history for me. It's like, oh yeah, it was Spock and Sarek haven't spoken for 18 years. Oh yeah, that's normal.
And for us, it seems like such a sad thing. It's so emotional that it's like, well, that's your family and you should be close and you guys should be getting together and having drinks and celebrating and stuff. You should see him on the holidays. But for a Vulcan, when you really chalk it up to like logic, yeah, why
Yeah, it's
we
like,
don't
why should I do that?
we don't have anything to talk about. I mean,
Right. Right.
we
Until
don't
you start
conduct
to see the
business with
sense.
each other. Yeah. So yeah, until you need a blood transfusion, then it's like maybe I should
Oh,
go
and that, yes. Yeah.
get close. I should see what he's been up to. I should check his health.
Yeah.
Check on my son's health. Okay, so we see that fast little ship was traveling at warp 10, which I think our measurement of warp changes in the future, but that's okay. And it's matching the course of the Enterprise. Then we see a confrontation. Sarek enters the mess hall again, and I see he takes a pill. I think that's kind of a little hint to us that he's not perfectly healthy. But I didn't realize that until watching it the second time around. But Gav approaches him again and wants to speak, and he tells Sarek like, you must tell me your vote. And he's getting very heated right away. And so Sarek's like, I might as well tell you whatever. That we are voting to admit the Corridon planets into the Federation, and Gav argues with him, and they get a little tussle. Gav like barely puts his hand on him, and I see Sarek just hardly flinches, barely moves at all, and Gav goes flying. So it's just acting, but
Mhm.
I like to add a little bit of extra story into there. So in my mind, I'm thinking Sarek, yeah, strong Vulcan. If he wanted to, he could have thrown him against the wall. But in an actual hand-to-hand fight, I'm pretty sure Sarek, being Vulcan, would have beaten Gav anyways. And Gav probably knows that. So I believe he was prepared to take a dive and make it look like Sarek was the aggressor assaulting
Yeah.
him or something like that. He was
Okay,
ready
yeah,
to.
this part of the episode is actually something that has always kind of irritated me,
Yeah.
because you see Sarek just stand there,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, Gav goes flying back into the bulkhead, and it's
Yeah.
like he's just done this, and it's like, well, I could do that. I mean,
Yeah, that's nothing.
I could direct traffic. Like, I mean, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So it didn't really seem like Sarek actually did anything. So
Mhm.
I always wondered why that was. And yeah, I could see a Tellarite, looking like a Brazilian soccer player and taking a dive.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So then Kirk comes in and breaks it up again. And then Gav threatens Sarek, and Sarek kind of, yeah, your threats are pointless or whatever, pretty much illogical. But then we cut to the next scene and we find Gav is dead. A crewman finds his body, and his neck had been broken. Bones and Kirk believe that Sarek is the prime suspect because the way it was broken, you have to be strong and smart. No, exactly.
And again, like McCoy already like acknowledges in this episode how little he knows about Vulcan physiology. And yet he's willing to accept that, it must have been some sort of secret Vulcan martial arts strike that Tal Shaya that snapped his neck.
Yeah.
And that's the other criticism I have about this episode, is how like ineffective McCoy seems as a medical practitioner in this show.
And I pointed that out in other episodes too. We see that all the time. And I would imagine in the future, as a doctor, you have a lot of technology to help you, but you're more of like a vet than you are like a human doctor, because you have a crew with, maybe at least 10 different races of aliens on one ship. You got to know where their organs are, how they work, how to heal them, what medicines interact with what ways. And you got to be very skilled. And yet he seems like he knows humans, and that's it.
And that's it. Like, he seems very, very like, biased in terms of his medical knowledge on board a starship. But what's interesting about the time frame with that is that we see Gav and the altercation with Sarek, and then it's like moments later, his body, like Gav's body, is stuffed in a Jeffries tube.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the transition, and I think that's one of the secrets why DC Fontana is able to like squeeze so much into this show, is because of those transitions. And we see another example of that time transition when, flash forward, Kirk gets attacked by the infiltrator, right?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
happens just like
That was
instantly.
like, what the heck's going on here? Yeah.
Yeah,
All of a
it's
sudden.
like, did I miss something? Yeah, like,
Exactly.
it's like,
I
hey
actually
man,
went
you got
back
a
to
pack
watch
of
it again.
cigarettes? No, I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah. Yeah, it was very sudden, but it's like, well, you get the context. You don't have to see the discussion or see him looking shady to know they're fighting. That must be the bad guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see. So, so yeah, so they go to question Sarek because obviously he's most likely. I mean, they were just arguing, and he explains he was in private meditation, which is a good cover story.
Yeah.
And then he conveniently at that time falls ill. He's falls to the ground. He's sick. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, this guy's faking it. He's trying to sneak out. He's going to be laying in the med bay and then sneak out and take a shuttle or something like that. But no, Bones determines that he had a heart attack.
Yes.
And Sarek explains, I think he said he had 4 heart attacks, some on his home planet, and then one just a couple hours before that one. And so obviously he has a heart condition, and it's not good. He needs surgery, and the doc says he could do the surgery, but he needs compatible blood. And they've checked the records; they don't have anybody. But Spock is kind of a match. His blood is mixed with human blood, but there's a way that they can filter it out and use his blood during the surgery.
Yep, T negative blood.
Yeah. So Spock offers to take this like experimental drug that was only used on
Rigelians.
Rigelians. That's it, from Rigel 5, not Rigel 4.
Because Rigelian physiology is very similar to Vulcan physiology, which makes me think about, well, if the Romulans are similar to Vulcans and the Rigelians, maybe the Vulcans have been a little bit more,
promiscuous. Yeah, exactly. And so if he takes this drug, it will make him produce more blood cells, as far as I understand, or his blood will regenerate faster. And so they plan on just using him as like a blood bag, doing a transfusion while conducting the surgery on his dad. So
right,
that makes sense. But then we see Kirk is in a fight. This is that quick cut to like, oh crap, he's already in the middle of it. We didn't see any ramp up, but we're there. He's fighting an Andorian in one of the corridors. Who pulls a knife and he ends up stabbing Kirk. Kirk collapses. I think he knees the guy in the face though, so he knocks him out. But then he's losing blood as he's trying to speak over the comms and get security over there. He collapses, and this that was a great action-packed scene. But this kind of throws a wrench in Spock's plans, because now Spock is in command, and so he can't voluntarily go to sickbay and give blood or be a part of this transfusion for his dad, because that would be stepping down from his responsibilities in command to, care for a family member and outside of, the chain of command. It's not okay, I guess.
Okay. Now, have you ever seen that poster? It was pretty popular a few years back. Kirk Fu. This is Kirk Fu.
I don't think so.
Okay. It's a great poster because it shows you all of Captain Kirk's combat moves.
Yeah.
There's the drop kick. There's the wrestling shoulder throw. There's the double-handed fist hammer type, strike.
Is it him fighting a Gorn?
Oh yeah, there's a Gorn on it. Yeah.
Okay. I think I found it.
But this is the episode where it establishes Kirk Fu. Like, he does all of that. He's got the somersault, the judo throw, the karate chop, the haymaker punch. He's got everything. Like, it's just such 1960s comic book fighting.
Mm-hmm.
But Shatner did it so well. Like, he was able to just make us believe that this was an actual style of fighting that was, not, he didn't learn this in Iowa. He had to have been taught this. Like, right. It was a real Federation style, of fighting. And it comes out. Like, this is the episode where that comes out. And I love it.
Yeah. And especially the fighting scene in this episode was good, because I remember seeing other episodes where it seems really cheesy and really fake, and yet this one, it was very believable. I liked it. I think we got some major lag going. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, it's just the video lag then. Okay, we'll edit this stuff out too. But yeah, I don't know if it's my computer or just the internet in general. Where was I? Okay, so yeah, at this point, Spock can't help his dad because he has to take command of the ship. His mom pleads with him that he could put another crewman like Scotty in command, and he can step down so he can go help us save his dad's life. Now, to me, and he says, no, I can't do that. I can't abandon my responsibilities for personal reasons. To me, I would kind of spin this and justify it in the fact that Sarek is obviously vital to these negotiations that will prevent war. So if he dies and his, because we heard from the Tellarite that his vote will sway many others. So if he dies, this may, they won't have that middleman, that important voice, and perhaps these negotiations will lead to war. So I would say, yeah, I need to step down and go save this important delegate, not my dad, but this important delegate, because otherwise we might have more problems.
Well, again, it comes down to what would Sarek expect, right?
Yeah.
So Spock is not thinking, what do I want to do? It's what should I do? What do what do the dictates of my position, of my rank, order me to do?
Mm-hmm.
What about the mission parameters? And then there's got to be, like, at some point, what would my dad think, right?
Yeah.
So these are the different levels that Spock is operating on, and I think it comes down to the needs of the many.
Mm-hmm.
So the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, right? Well,
Yeah.
in this case, the needs of the many, the safety of the ship is paramount, because it's not just the crew, it's not just Sarek, it's like all the other delegates. So he's got to protect the mission, he's got to protect the ship, and he could, and he does admit this, he could put Mr. Scott in command in normal circumstances.
Yeah.
But they have a saboteur on board. So there's, security issues going on right now. And there's a ship out there that's basically trying to pick them over, So they're in a tactical situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be negligent for the highest ranking officer to, basically, disavow his responsibilities to the ship and the crew and the mission simply because, well, my dad needs me.
Yeah.
Right. And that would never fly. And even if you think about, like, a naval board of inquiry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, my dad needed my blood, so I had to go give that. But you put the ship in jeopardy. So that's where Spock has to sort of like sift through all those different things. And I think he would I think he would naturally go to that. And actually, I was like, yep, I'm sorry, but I got to go with Spock on this one. So, yeah.
Yeah. And if maybe there was a way to put more weight behind Sarek's importance, maybe he could justify it when he, after he saves his dad, he would obviously question, why would you step down from your responsibilities to save me? But it's like, well, I wasn't saving my father, just like how he spoke with Amanda about not my son, but a Starfleet crewman. He's like, I wasn't trying to save my father. I was trying to save this critical delegate who, is leading negotiations or something like that. But we didn't really see enough, I think, to solidify his value in the negotiations. So that's a good point.
Well, I mean, he already stated too that his personal opinion didn't matter. He was representing the views of his government, and the government, those were going to be made quite clear. And so he's got 2 Vulcan aides who are with him. So if something happened to him, they would just do, what their government told them to say, and then that would be the end of it. So at that point, I don't think, like, even though Sarek, would have a lot of influence, and yes, he is respected by many other people, he's still representing his government, and his government basically said, yeah, be a mouthpiece.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. That makes sense then. So when Kirk wakes back up, then they devise a plan, right? Because Bones explains to him what's going on. So Bones gives him like a clean bill of health, pretty much, brings him onto the bridge, and they convince Spock that, yeah, I patched him up, he's good to go, he's back to being captain.
Mhm.
So and you can see it in Kirk, he's like not even fully there, when he's just kind of waving him on, but he tells Spock, yeah, go ahead, go take care of your dad, I got this, and he sits in the captain's chair. And very leery though, Spock does not believe that
Oh
he's
yeah, you could
okay.
see.
Yeah. And the plan was that as soon as Kirk's gonna sit there for a second, as soon as Spock leaves the bridge, he's gonna call Scotty to come take over so he can rest and heal while Scotty deals with this problem they have. But that small vessel that's been messing around with them comes back and is in view. So he's like, "Oh no, belay that order. I'm gonna stay here for a little bit." So he does. He stays in the seat. And Ahura was able to track the signal they were getting and finds out that it's in the brig. So sure enough, that Andorian that they have in the brig must be the one transmitting the signal that's communicating to that small ship. And so they I think maybe later they search him here, yeah, and find a transmitter. His little antenna, obviously
Yeah, because
fake.
he tries to attack the guard, and the guard um, basically stuns him, and
Mhm.
the fake Andorian falls, and his antenna snaps off,
Yeah, yeah,
and
and
then
then
there's a transmitter inside the antenna.
yeah, that was
Yeah,
that was pretty good. I like how all that goes. I mean, it's just a little more, a little more tech would have been great to show what his transmitter looks like better or something, but it was perfect.
hmm
Uh, so then they're under attack. The small vessel, starts attacking the Enterprise, and it's moving too fast for them to actually return fire. Is pretty much their problem with it. It's not that it's got shields or they can't see it. They can see it and it's coming by, but it's just, I think they said earlier it was going at warp 10. And they even show a scene that I'm pretty sure remastered scene that looks really good, of their phaser fire trying to chase the vessel, but it was just not fast enough.
yeah. It's interesting with the remastered one. Like basically in the original, like the previously non-edited, the original version,
Hmm.
you just see like a flash of light.
Yeah.
In this one, what I was hoping for with the remastered was that you actually get to see the Orion vessel, but all we still see is like a bunch of kaleidoscopic spinning circles, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's like the same thing with the bug in the antenna. It would have been nice to have seen a little bit more detail, but again, Star Trek was a series in its second season. It was barely making ends meet. It had a tight budget.
Yeah.
They couldn't do stuff like that, and it's still one of the things I wish I could have seen what an Orion ship looked like in what the 1967 creators of this 1966 1968, right? Like, I mean, I would love to see what an Orion ship looked like in the minds of those people.
Yeah, exactly. And I would imagine it would be, I mean, they're traders, so they'd probably mostly be like cargo vessels, except I mean this one's real small. So yeah, they probably honestly buy and sell and trade in everybody else's tech. So their
Yeah,
vessels may not have a distinct characteristic because they use everybody else's.
have you ever heard of a game called Starfleet Battles?
No.
Okay, so in the 80s, they used the designs from the Amarillo Design Bureau that put the Starfleet technical manual together, and this game company created a game called Starfleet Battles, and it was a starship combat game, and it used the Federation, Klingons, Romulans, but then it brought in the Kazinti, the Kazin, and it also included the Orions. And the Orions were the coolest race because their ships could double their warp engine output.
Wow. What?
And when it's a combat tactical game, so you have like energy allocation and stuff like that to put together. But the Orions were really cool because they could also use weapons from every race,
Hmm.
because like you said, they dealt in everybody's technology, right?
Yeah.
And their ships, because of this episode, could be tooled to be like suicide ships in combat, which means they would double their warp engine output, but you would have to lose a point every turn that you did that.
Yeah.
So eventually it would basically explode.
Yeah,
But it was
kamikaze ship.
exactly, and they got that idea from this episode. And
Yeah,
it's just
that's
so
awesome.
cool to see that. I haven't played the game in ages, but I mean, it's a really fun game because it brings in all those Star Trek intricacies like this, like
Mhm.
the Orions.
You said that
Um,
when was that game? That was from the 80s?
that's from the '80s. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
man.
still going.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll,
it's amazing.
I'll have to look
As a kid, I played that like every day.
at Yeah.
Nerd.
I love it. When I had the time, now I got a young son, but when I had the time, I would love playing good games.
Oh yeah.
And Star Trek Online, I've heard from other people. My other co-host, Kevin, plays Star Trek Online. Someday, when I get a little more time, I definitely want to dive into that.
I
It's been
tried
getting
it.
big. Yeah,
I
you like
tried
it?
it and I couldn't get into it for some reason. And I think
Okay.
it's because it's one of those games where you have to have like a group of people to
Mhm.
show you the ropes and to show you what's fun about it. If you just jump into it by yourself without any, um, uh, any advanced planning or collaboration, you just go in by yourself. You're not going to get the full experience of it. So
Okay.
I don't pretend to know very much about it, but I did try it,
Mhm.
and I don't know. I think maybe if I went in with a group of people and tried to accomplish missions together, we'd have a lot more fun.
All right. Well, in the next couple of years, if I get you know, the time really to put together a small crew and start playing, then I'll have to send you a message.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because I'd like a chance to appreciate it because like you said, who doesn't like to share fandoms and geekiness with other people?
Yeah, exactly. So at this point, Bones is conducting that surgery right on Sarek,
Right.
and very risky surgery. He even explained earlier that it's like this would be hard to do on a human, let alone on a Vulcan. Like I've read the books, I've seen the pictures, I know where the organs are, but I don't have firsthand experience actually doing it. So if I
Yeah.
don't kill him, then that they say that drug that I have to give him might, which they can avoid that now because Spock will be taking the drug instead. So Sarek doesn't have the risk of the drug, but still he has the risk of an inexperienced doctor. Um, they do a good job in this at this point though, because while the surgery is going on, they're being attacked by the ship, and energy is being depleted. So you see Kirk is like, taking power from different parts of the ship, and for at least for me, I'm like, oh my god, he's gonna end up turning off sick bay. He's gonna take out the power mid surgery, not realizing it or something like that, and Sarek's gonna die, and it's gonna be Kirk's fault that Spock's dad is dead. Um, so it just kind of raised the stakes. It was more exciting.
Yeah, and this is a this is one of those moments that a lot of people complain and criticize, and they
Mhm.
go, "Well, this seems like a reckless thing to do in the first place. Why would they even do it in the worst of conditions with somebody that doesn't know what he's doing?" And and this is the part where you need to step back and say, "This isn't real.
Right.
This
Yeah.
is drama." This is the part of the story
Yeah.
that we know is risky, and we don't know if they're going to make it, but in the end they do, because that's what makes fiction fun, right? That's what makes the story engaging. We want to feel like we can lose Spock and Sarek in this because that's what drives the drama.
Yeah.
And that's just part of writing. And it's so funny how people complain from a common sense perspective, and it's like, this isn't common sense, this is fantasy.
Yeah, none of this is real. And
None of this is real.
if you're trying to pick it apart and find holes and stuff like that, you'll find them. They're there.
You'll find they're there.
Look at Spock's
Exactly.
ears closely in every episode. You're gonna find a few of them where there's a seam, but
And this is what we call a willing suspension of disbelief, ladies and gentlemen.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So I don't remember exactly how he did it, but I believe he turned off the power to the ship or enough to make it look like they were weakened or
Yep.
vulnerable.
Yep. He dropped power on the port side, dropped the shields, made them hang in space, look like they were
Like bait.
powerless, and yeah, exactly. And what's interesting is that it's the Orion infiltrator on board who's on the bridge
Yeah.
who's being used as a device to divulge what he thinks Kirk's strategy is. It's like, oh, You're luring him in. It's you're being bait. And he looks over and goes, yep, yep. Aren't I good? Yeah. You stabbed me. I'm bleeding profusely, and I'm still beating your friends.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? So there's that bit to make Kirk look good, right? With somebody who just, and it's like, but I always did want the security guards just to stand a little bit closer.
Yeah, keep one hand on him or something.
Exactly, right?
I mean, he
But
might have
that's
another
what he
knife.
does.
What's in his
So he
other
drops
antenna?
him.
We don't know.
Yeah, so he drops the power, draws him in, and then nails him with that point blank shot. And
Yeah.
Captain Kirk's reputation as a starship combat tactician is secured.
Yeah.
But again, this goes back to that whole sandwich thing, right? Like you've got starship combat, you've got Kirk being a tactical genius, you've got Kirk Fu, the personal combat, you've got espionage, like everything is in this story.
Yeah.
And it just works really seamlessly. And it's the sandwich.
Yeah, you could probably unpack this episode if you really, if they were making a new series that was, retelling these stories. You could make this into like a 4-episode, story if you really.
What would be a really great short trek?
What's that?
Would be the preparation for Babel, like from the Orion's perspective. How were the Orions, like what did the Orions have to do to get the guy on board the ship? What did the ship look like? That would answer one of my things. And what was the crew on the ship thinking? Like that would be a really cool 20-minute, fan fiction story right there.
Yeah, I could
if
see
anybody wanted to put that together. There's a way of getting involved with your fandom, right? Is creating that story about what the Orions were. But that's what a good story should do, though. A good story should make you ask questions, like, who are the 2 aides? Why did they get the job? Who are the Andorians? We never really did get a chance, to see part of their background. And this is the first time we got a chance to see Andorians and Tellarites, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a good story should make you ask those questions. And it's just enough to, like, those little details work so well because we don't know very much about them. So if we don't know much about these things, then that creates the need for more stories later on.
Yeah. And the Andorian that wasn't the attacker, the true Andorian, it seems like he should recognize that this guy, first off, his antennas are fake. And, he's obviously not one of my people. I don't know who he is. So I wonder if maybe, we see in Discovery that the Andorians and the Orions work together. So maybe this was an early, peace negotiation between them or something.
What I liked about Enterprise is that with Jeffrey Combs playing Shrek, right? Or Shrank, I loved the greater insight we got into the Andorians because of that series. And we learned from Enterprise, and it's fun to look back at Journey to Babel from Enterprise's perspective, is that Andorians are sneaky, shifty. You can't trust them. They've got multiple games going at once. And so one of the things that occurred to me when I rewatched this and seeing it from that 21st century perspective of what we know about the Andorians now is he goes, oh, I don't know who these people are. He wasn't one of my party. Then how did he get on board the ship and attach himself to your diplomatic staff, Mr. Andorian ambassador? Like, come on, man. You got to know something. And so it's like, oh, no, I'm going to disavow this dude. But at the same time, that they were playing, some sort of a game. So I kind of like that perspective of the Andorians.
And it was maybe he was the backup plan, but he wanted to be close and watch the Orion do the dirty work and, keep his hands clean and be able to walk away from it if it went as he had planned. Yeah, that's that's pretty good. I love that even deeper story that, I didn't even conceive of in the watching it the first time around. So after all this, we do see that small vessel ends up self-destructing, and they explain, like you were saying, it uses, it's able to fly faster than other ships because it doesn't have to worry about returning home or, much travel. It's just going to dump all its fuel, all its energy immediately to, for the fight. But it's like a kamikaze ship. It's planning on self-destructing in the end anyways. And then the Andorian prisoner, they're dragging him off, and he reveals that he had already taken a poison as well. So he dies, and I kind of like, I don't know, it was just kind of funny that he had miscalculated how long it would take. He was saying like I have 4 more hours or something like that,
Right.
and he died as they were dragging him away. Uh, but yeah, then Sarek and Spock are recovering pretty quickly too from the surgery, and like Spock doesn't need much recovery from a blood transfusion, but
That
um,
pig-headed Vulcan stamina, I couldn't have pulled him through without it.
right. So, but the two of them and Kirk is in there as well. They're all talking about the situation. They extrapolate that must have been Orion's, though they still have the body of the false Andorian, the imposter who poisoned himself. So I'm pretty sure they can look at his body, maybe wipe off the makeup or something like that, and see the green
Well,
skin.
and Spock says, I think that you will find that he's an Orion. Right.
Oh,
So
that's
of
true.
course
Yeah.
there's the inference that they'll do a post-mortem and discover the his true identity and his background. So yeah, I think that was kind of inferred. But again, they crammed so much into this episode that there's a lot of those inferences that come out too, which make for more stories. Like that would be another cool 10-minute story.
Yeah.
Right.
And I
realized going
realized
through this where's his lungs?
yeah. And watching it the
I'm a
second
doctor,
time,
not an entomologist, right?
yeah. I noticed the second time around too. I paid closer attention once I realized that he was Orion and he has green eyes. It's like, why wouldn't they notice that from the beginning? I don't think Andorians ever have green eyes.
There you go. Yeah, nice.
That was just a cool little detail. They didn't even have to do that. They hadn't really established that Orions have green eyes, but and I realized that this is the first appearance of an Orion in the actual aired episodes, I think, because the original pilot, The Cage, wasn't aired originally, and in that they had the Orion, they had the woman turned
Vina,
into an Orion dancer.
Well, and that's interesting too, because they actually don't describe her as an Orion slave girl, right? Because they earlier in the episode when Pike is talking to the doctor Boyce, and he's like, oh, Chris, yeah, you you an Orion trader, dealing in animal slave women. Okay, yeah. Yeah, not a popular way of describing something, but let's face it was a different time, and that's the way they talked about things, and they acknowledged it, right?
Yeah.
So when Vina shows up as a green dancer, we don't know that she's an animal slave woman. We just see her as this really hot, attractive green chick who's dancing for the purpose of enticing Pike to stay with the Telosians. So you're right. Like she's the first appearance of an Orion, right? Although we don't know about it.
Yeah. And even here, I mean, this Orion that we see kind of is, in makeup and looks like an Andorian.
And
so
he's an Andorian. So yeah.
So later on,
I call shenanigans.
Yeah, later we'll get to meet him. So we do have I think 2 more scenes, but Amanda and Sarek are talking, and she wants Sarek to thank Spock for saving his life. But Sarek explains, well, why would I thank him? That was the logical thing for him to do.
Right.
And in my mind, though, I'm like, was that truly the logical thing? He could have, he was risking his own life by taking this drug that might not work with him. And he's, risking his life by giving blood when, power might go out. He might become short of blood or something like that. He didn't need to do any of these things. He could just said, I'm okay, and watched his dad die. So I don't know. It was logical if you care for your father to, risk your own health for his. But if it was a stranger, it would be a lot easier to say, we'll have to find another way around this, or wait until we get to another planet. So, but yeah, this dad's trying to tiptoe around saying thanks to his son. But Spock calls his mom emotional, and asks why Sarek married her. And she's like, oh my God. He says at the time it seemed the logical thing to do. She kind of laughs it off and does a little Vulcan, 2-finger kiss thing. I would have been punched in the throat, I think, or kicked or something. Like if I was to say, well, about my wife, like, oh, I don't know. It seemed like a good idea at the time. That wouldn't go over very well, but I'm sure she is used to air quotes Vulcan humor by now. So that is, yeah, crazy. And then we do have a little sign off with Kirk, Spock, and Sarek are recovering, and Bones Bones is like pretty much telling them they need to stay. They can't leave, and he's just loving it. He has to raise his voice at them and stuff to keep them in their beds. He says, "I finally got the last word." Big old cheesy smile.
Yeah, yeah, and
I love that.
that's the DeForest Kelly's southern relaxed humor, and
Yeah.
that's the kindly moment. But I mean, in that moment too, where it's the joke, it punctuates the end of the show. Again, it just there was a great comic IDW put out about 10 years ago. John Byrne, who's a big Star Trek fan, created it. It was called Leonard McCoy Frontier Doctor. And in it, like, McCoy basically, he has a small medical ship and a small medical staff, and they, it's in between Star Trek the Motion Picture and Wrath of Khan, and that's the time frame. And basically he goes off, and he's sorry, it's before the motion picture, that's right, because he has the big beard, and he goes around the Federation basically as a medical doctor, and he has medical adventures. And it was kind of cool, but it also shows like how much knowledge McCoy actually had. This episode, and that little cheesy joke at the end, this episode does diminish McCoy a little bit in my eyes, but at the same time, it goes back to that drama thing that I was talking about. It's necessary for the story, and unfortunately McCoy has to suffer. But yeah, there's a little bit of cheesiness at the end, and McCoy gets that little bit of recognition. See, I finally got the last word. All right, we'll let you have it there.
Yeah.
Thanks for operating on us with without even checking Google MD or
Right. Oh yeah, he must have access to all the Vulcan database.
Come on, that's how he had to have been doing it, right? He's literally going through Google MD while he's operating on these guys.
Oh man, watch the YouTube video. They'll walk you through it.
That's
Just
it.
Pause it. Click back a few seconds. Pause it right there. Okay.
So you want to fix a Vulcan's heart.
Exactly. Oh man. And later, I mean, I don't think we see holograms in this series, but later on, definitely in other Star Treks, there's holograms. So you could have a program that walks you through it as well. But
that would have been nice.
So I'm sure you probably got a lot better moral of the story than me, because there was a lot going on in this episode. I didn't get like a clear really passionate moral to the story. What did you find?
Well, like I said, Star Trek is always a product of its times. Yeah. And during the Cold War, there was the need for peace. There was the need for a balance of power to be established between the Western nations of the world and the Eastern Bloc. And let's face it, 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. The 60s were a volatile period where espionage and diplomacy were very dominant themes in culture.
Yeah.
And it's just natural that that Star Trek should include a story with a similar sort of theme, given the fact that the Federation is patterned after the principles of the United States. Like, it's supposed to be a democratic organization that respects the individuality and diversity of different races, and so there had to be similar sort of dynamics in the galaxy. What I thought it was interesting is that it wasn't like she didn't extend the metaphor further by using the Romulans or using the Klingons. And the Klingons, let's face it, were the big enemy in ToS, and they were representative of the Soviet Union at the time. So if you want to draw a moral from this story, it's that peace isn't easy. Trying to negotiate with the United Nations isn't easy. But they did it, and the principles of the Federation are supposed to show the United States, because I mean it's American television, right? It's supposed to
Yeah.
show that that the Americans are right as how they pursue peace,
Hmm.
and it can be done. It's not easy.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I think if there was anything that you could take from this, it would
Mhm.
be a reflection of those Cold War values, and how difficult it was to sustain peace in a very volatile time. And
Yeah.
even though the 23rd century, it's still 300 years past 1967, um, the moral is still there that it's always going to be difficult to establish, like, even though humanity has done it,
Uh-huh.
the challenge now is how do we get everybody to recognize individual diversity in the galaxy just like we do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And at the same time, when it rains, it pours. Like you have all this going on at the same time. They're being attacked, by the imposter, and the surgery's going
Mhm.
on, and the ship's being attacked. It's like it all hits the fan at the same time. And sometimes you just got to roll with it and be prepared to fight on multiple fronts at the same time.
Yeah, and that's the challenge of peace. That's
Yeah.
the challenge of like it's never going to be one problem to solve.
Mhm.
But isn't that's a good life metaphor too, isn't it?
Yeah. Very true.
Like, life isn't just a series of, oh, this is my problem today.
Yeah. uh,
Everything hits you at once sometimes.
so if you were to give this a letter grade, what grade would you give this episode?
I would have to give it an A minus,
Okay.
because like I said, this is one of my top five,
Yeah.
right? And I'm a hard marker, but um the two criticisms I have are, the way that McCoy just doesn't seem to sort of measure up, right?
Yeah.
And then missing out on some of those tech issues that I would have liked to have seen, like detail of the Orion ship, more technology, uh, and the food. Like the
Yeah.
food in the dining hall. Like, I mean, I know that the budget is tight, but could we have food that actually looks like food
Yeah. At least
instead
different
of,
textures or something like that.
like, it's Play-Doh, people. Like, I know it's Play-Doh, but like that's, and it's only one type of food anyway. So even though it looks alien, right? It's
Yeah.
still one type of alien food. Why don't you have like an alien, pig-like creature, or you have like a
Yeah.
lava lamp with a
And
straw attached to it? Like,
you could be super creative with this because no one can say what these aliens can and can't eat. Maybe they all
right,
have different types of digestion. So yeah,
right.
you can make it really funny.
But the strength
Yeah.
of this episode is just how much DC Fontana managed to cram in there, and why it's an essential part of Star Trek lore. Like, it's one of those episodes that established canon and established material that writers would use, generations afterwards. So
Yeah.
it's one of the best ones.
I like it. Yeah, I'd give it like a solid A. Especially the writing was so good. Directing, like we mentioned, the framing and stuff was exceptional. And the acting, I mean, DeForest Kelly, we've seen in several episodes where it's like, as a professional doctor, he should know a little better than that. But it's his character, I guess. It's I don't know,
It's
maybe
irascible.
it's early in Federation, or early in the Starfleet, getting to know others alien races, maybe. So they haven't really mixed and mingled their medical knowledge enough, but I don't know. But yeah, it's a really good
And
episode.
it's the 60s as well. And if you've ever read any type of 60s science fiction,
Mhm,
yeah, by today's standards, the technology is very simplistic,
mhm.
and the expectations are, in line with what we would expect at a 60s culture. So,
Yeah.
you have to have that acceptance as well. But the entire episode is probably one of the best ones out of the 3 years of Star Trek,
Yeah.
um, the original series. It really is.
I like it. All right. Do you have anything else you want to talk about with this episode before we close up?
Um, just that, Jane Wyman, like superstar actress of her age,
Mhm.
is present in this, and that's something that really needs to be marveled at, because she, that's like A-level talent
Yeah.
on a tiny show like this. And she was one of those again, veteran actresses who, have been in like about 40 or 50 movies at that time.
Mhm.
Um, Ronald Reagan's first wife, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of history in this one as well. I mean, it's it's a great episode, and it establishes so much, and it not only allows us to look at it from a Star Trek fictional historical point of view, but there's also a lot of history with going into that Cold War type thing
Mhm.
that I was talking about before, that you really understand the 60s culture from its stories, from its fiction, and this is one of those stories that does that.
Nice. Yeah. Well, you guys heard it here from Mr. John Kirk. Before we sign off, I know you write for Den of Geeks. Is there anywhere else that people can go to see some of your work if they want to get to know you more?
Yeah, there's popmythology.com. There's denofgeek.com, forcesofgeek.com, and I have articles on TrekCore, where I wrote for about 4 years, and also Back Issue Magazine, Star Wars Insider, and I have 2 articles coming up in Star Wars Insider this year.
Nice.
And my last one was about Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, who played Captain Carson Teva in The Mandalorian. And so I got a chance to do an interview with him, which is a lot of fun.
I'm excited because he's going to be playing live action Uncle Iroh in the new Avatar series.
Yep, and
he's a great actor.
I am scheduled to talk to him about it as well.
Oh man, yeah, I gotta check that out. That'd be cool.
Well, he's actually a friend of mine, so he is a fantastic dude and just a great man overall. So really happy to know him personally in my life. So
what's funny is I like a lot of people know him from Star Wars, and I'm a geek. I'm into all sci-fi, but I seen him first in Kim Convenience, which was
Kim's Convenience. Yeah,
I love that show. It's so good. I tell my friends about it. Nobody's seen it before. None of my geeky friends have seen it. I'm like, dude, you guys gotta check it out. It's like it's just so hilarious.
Yeah, it was one of the highest. It was the highest rated comedy on Canadian television, and it only lasted for 5 seasons, and it was a real shame.
Yeah,
because it was taking off. It was just like it already had an established audience, and I think he won 3 Canadian Screen Awards for it. It was a quality show, and it really spoke about the Canadian experience from an immigrant point of view.
Yeah,
and why it was just it's you can't say enough good about it. It's just it needs to continue.
Yeah, I wonder if they could make a spin-off series from that. Maybe follow the kids' futures or something like that.
They did actually. There is I think Nicole who plays the love interest of Simu Liu. I think she had a spin-off, and I don't think it went anywhere, but I could be mistaken on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
But yeah, it's Canada. We don't do spin-offs. We're more apologetic, and we're like, we're sorry. Did that bother you? Okay, we won't do it again.
Well, yeah, I'm just surprised like an American company didn't come and like buy the rights to it, and then Disney's been buying everything and blowing it up. So I'm surprised they didn't try to get their hands on it or something.
Who knows? And this is the inside background stuff that you find out about like 5 years later, right? And it's like, oh man. So
yeah,
I'll have to have Paul on stage.
That'd be awesome. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Next week we're going to be reviewing season 2, episode 11, Friday's Child. So make sure to join us next week. If you haven't already, go check out our website, geekfreakspodcast.com. We're going to have some links to some of Mr. John Kirk's work on our site, so you guys can find some of that. And check us out: Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and we do live Discord. You're always welcome to join. So yeah, check us out. Until next time, transporter room 2 to beam up.